Okay, so I'm going to approach this little spiel sort of how I would do this with a client, right? And what we're going to be talking about is the experience of pain. Okay? What pain is, what pain isn't. And this is a really, really important distinction when you're working with someone who is struggling with chronic discomfort, persistent discomfort, is that they need to understand really what's kind of going on in their body. So the first and most important thing to recognize when we're talking about what pain is and what pain isn't is pain is not damage. Okay? Pain is a subjective sensory experience that exists here. And it can be in conjunction with or independent of any actual physical damage in our body. Okay? Most people who come in for massage are usually dealing with some form of persistent, ongoing pain complaints that either had no associated injury or trauma, or if there was some injury or trauma, it was months or years or even decades ago. The body's pretty good at healing itself, so unless it was some severe damage, torn muscles, strained ligament, light fracture, those heal pretty good. And they do not have to be the cause of someone's pain moving forward. So step one is always helping someone understand that pain is an indication of threat. It's an indication that the body is concerned about something that is happening. It is not inherently an indication that there is something damaged or broken or of concern in that regard. It doesn't mean that there's not, but it does not have to be. And this is really important when you're dealing with people who are struggling with a persistent pain complaint because they think to themselves, oh, it hurts. I should avoid doing that to make sure that I don't do anything further damaging to my body. And what happens then is we get stuck in a cycle that exists of when I move, it hurts, therefore I don't move. And when I don't move, I'm reinforcing the notion to my central nervous system that movement is inherently dangerous. And then when I attempt again, I'm either not better at all, or in many cases, I'm actually getting worse. When we can separate pain as damage, now all of a sudden it provides the freedom for the person, the patient, the client, to then begin to explore some form of movement or activity, to begin to reclaim something in their life that has value or meaning to them. When we look at pain, and activity, there can be some pain or discomfort during the activity. If it's severe, obviously stop. But mild or moderate, we might be okay with that. We look at immediately afterwards. Did it flare anything up? Is there any mild or moderate discomfort after exercise or activity? That's probably okay too, as long as it's not severe and it doesn't last way too long. What we're really being mindful for is the prolonged flare, right? What happens hours later, that evening, that night, the next morning. Okay? Most research would indicate that within 24 hours, as long as if I work out now, it's noon, by noon tomorrow, theoretically, I should be back down to baseline. Whatever yesterday's stress was probably safe. If I work out at noon today and by noon tomorrow, I'm still pretty stirred up. Things are still pretty tight or achy or painful. And whatever I did that day before might have been a little too much or a lot too much. I personally don't like the 24-hour window. I'm more of a 12 to 16-hour window guy, a little bit more conservative, but most of the consensus would say 24-hour cycle, you're probably in a good space. All right. That can be tricky, though, because it's not just the individual event that you need to be more worried about. It's the accumulated stress load of the day, and that's not just physical stress. Right? That is the overall stress load of the day. It could be psychological, it could be emotional, it could be physical. Right? We put all those things together to create that sensory experience. And so to start moving out of pain, in the most basic foundational way, what we have to do is identify what is a safe level of stress. How much stress can my body handle safely and recover within that window? And then we begin to use that as a springboard to progress. Right? The hardest part is the beginning, because if you do too much, you're going to flare it. 24, 72 hours, pain's going to be worse. It'll calm down, but it's going to be worse. If you don't do enough, there's no adaptation at all. There might even be maladaptation. So we have to figure out where in this middle ground can we be successful. And you don't have to be bumping right against the edge of the extreme. Anywhere in this safe ground is going to be positive adaptation. And oftentimes it's better to be somewhere in the middle, so that way if you do overdo it a little bit, you're still safe. If you do underdo it a little bit, you're still safe, and you're not falling on the either extreme. right? But that is the tough part, because once we find that, okay, we know this level of activity, stress level is safe, we can now do a little more and a little more. Oops, I did too much, it flares, I'm going to go back a step, hang out here for a little longer, and then start again. Right? It's a bumpy road out. So the first thing we always have to remember when we're dealing with people who are dealing with persistent or chronic pain is about threat, not damage. It has value and merit in keeping us safe, but it does not have to be something that we are super fearful of around the idea of we are injuring our bodies. Right? We are strong, resilient creatures. We forget that sometimes when things hurt, when they've been hurting for so long. But that's part of the process, is reclaiming that sense of strength and confidence and resiliency. So next time you're working with a client in pain, help them understand that pain is about threat. It's not inherently about damage, especially if there was no trauma, or if there was a trauma, if it was many weeks, months, or years before, that's probably not the issue anymore.